Hi guys, welcome back to Marvelman901. I'm going to talk about the comics that I posted on my Instagram this week. This is of course week 9, and I'm going to start with Ravage 2099 issue 18 from 1994. So this issue continues the previous issue from where Ravage fought Throwback, who is basically an evil part of himself, another Ravage basically. It also goes into the fact that his family, his parents and his sister is trying to push him out of his company, and his sister is basically proving that he is mentally unstable to continue this. He is put into an asylum, and his doctor is called Dr. Menkel, who actually turns out to be Throwback. He is placed into a sort of virtual reality where he has to fight this evil version of himself, or almost anyway, and it's a little bit confusing at first what actually happens, but eventually you realize that they are in a virtual reality and they fight, and he actually manages to defeat Throwback, thus leaving the asylum later on. So we're moving on to the next character here, and this is Halflife, the first Halflife, as there is a second one as well. She is an alien who has fought the West Coast Avengers. Previously, at least, she was introduced in Volume 2, Issue 12. Apparently, she has the ability to make things age very quickly, people and such. She is not a very big character. She has worked alongside Graviton, Quantum, and Sax. And, well, yeah. So we're gonna move on to the next issue here, which is X-Men 15 from 1965. It continues the previous issue where they fought the Sentinels. Now, they have come to the headquarters of the Sentinels, and they desperately try to break in to this heavily fortified fortress. 2 X-Men does actually manage to get in, only they are captured, the Beast and Iceman. Now, the Sentinels force their maker, who is called Bolivar Trask, into investigate the Beast's his origin. So it kind of puts him into a trance, and then try to figure out how it became what it is. I think it's a way to be able to fight the mutants, as that is their prime directive. The leader of the Sentinels is Master Molt, and he fights Professor X mentally, while the other X-Men are breaking Iceman out and try to fight the Sentinels. However, Professor X is defeated by the Master Mold, and he barely makes it back to his physical body. It will continue, of course, in the next issue. So we're moving on now to Uncanny X-Men 312 from 1994. This also continues the previous issue, but, it's basically Yukio who had kind of tried to get help from Storm, from this creature that had been hunting her for a while. Apparently this creature, Phalanx, is very powerful, kind of a techno-organic creature, kind of assimilates with things, objects, and maybe even people. It fights them, it hunts them all across New York City. Eventually they come across Gambit, who just happened to be nearby, and he helps in the fight. However, they are kind of cornered by this creature and the mold that he had used in a human, and it will continue in the next issue. Of course, got a little bit sidetracked here, as in the previous issue, when Sabretooth tried to escape captivity, he accidentally caused an overload, which nearly killed Iceman. Now they're trying to bring Iceman back. Beast is trying, of course, very desperately. More on that in the next issue there as well. Going over to another X-Men magazine called X-Men Adventures. Most people might know that this is from the hit animated TV series called X-Men animated TV series. something in the likes of that. Now, before we continue, I will say that the one who's written this is not, in fact, Karate Kid. It is another Ralph Macchio. Anyway, this is from Season 2, Issue 4 from 1994. It introduces Omega Red into the whole animated series, and he's a great villain, really. Really awesome. Great pencils here as well. Basically, this villain, this monster, is loose in Russia. The Russian government had made Darkstar, who is their operative, to stop him, or try to stop him. She fails. She really fails. However, Colossus learns that there's this bad guy, Omega Red, in his home country, and he needs to protect his country. So he and Jubilee move over to Russia, leaving a note for the rest of the X-Men to see. The other X-Men, they arrive home, that is, sees the note, and of course realizes that shit, we need to help these people. They really need help. Besides going to Russia, it's pretty cool too. Okay. So they go to Russia, those as well. Big fighting here against this monster, this Omega Red, and eventually Storm uses her weather powers to stop him, to freeze him in his tracks. Also, just poking in a little bit, other thing here is that Magneto and Professor X are in the Savage Land, trying to survive without their powers, as somehow some kind of energy field is negating their powers. I'm gonna move on here now to another character who is called Ikaris. He is of the Eternals, and he is actually the Eternal leader at the moment, the Prime Eternal. He has actually been a wrestler earlier. It's one of the kind of covers that the Eternals tend to use. He has, apart from the ordinary Eternal powers, he has the ability to kind of project cosmic energy from his eyes and hands in forms of heat, light, or concussive force. Otherwise, though, he's basically an Eternal. We're gonna move on to the next issue here, which is Tales of Suspense, issue 49 from 1964. Now, Tales of Suspense is mainly Iron Man, and another story as well, but I'm gonna just go for Iron Man here. And it guest stars the Angel from the X-Men. Now, apparently there's some kind of accident happening. Iron Man somewhat knows of it, but the Angel didn't, who happened just to be nearby. Just wrong place at wrong time. However, the Angel is bombarded with some radiation which alters his psyche, makes him kinda evil. Iron Man fails to stop the Angel, and the Angel kinda just goes home to the X-Mansion, where he picks a fight with his fellow X-Men and then leaves. Professor X desperately tries to stop him, but he fails. Iron Man manages to catch up with the Angel and tries to break the psychic change. However, it fails from now and then, really, and eventually almost killing Iron Man because he uses too much power. The Angel actually finally realizes what happens, and he saves Iron Man, and then he's back to normal. So that is that story, and we're gonna continue with Ghost Rider, Volume 3, Issue 49 from 1994. Now, as you might know, the Ghost Rider here is not Ghost Rider, but it is Vengeance, or Michael Badolino, something like that. Okay, so Michael is a police officer in New York. He has been under a lot of strain lately, so he needs to go on a vacation, or just have some days off. So he goes to the Cypress Hill Cemetery, where the previous Ghost Rider, Daniel Ketch, lies in the catacombs. However, the Incredible Hulk is there as well, as he looks for the source of some strange energy signature. Kind of the usual thing going on here, where People don't know who the other one is. They think they are villains. Bertolino thinks that the Hulk is in fact one of Hellgate's agents, so he turns into Vengeance, and when the Hulk sees Vengeance, he thinks that, well, this is a villain, because, well, Vengeance looks like a villain. So there's a big fight, of course, it always is. Meanwhile, 2 actual agents of Hellgate arrive, looking to get their target, who is Vengeance. The fight between the Hulk and Vengeance continues, and from out of nowhere, these 2 characters, these 2 villains, attack Vengeance. The Incredible Hulk decides to help, and then there's a team up instead, again, as usual. It all ends, of course, with the villains are gone, they leave or defeated or whatever, and the heroes go their separate ways. And as a extra special cliffhanger thing going on here, Ghost Rider's skull is no longer dormant, and it is on fire. He is reignited. See more on that in next issue. We're gonna go for Marvel Comics Presents 153, which is from 1994. Now, as you might know, Marvel Comics Presents is usually split into 4 different stories. This one continues from the previous issue with the Wolverine story called Pure Sacrifice. It is basically about Tiger, who had been kidnapped by a new villain, and Wolverine is looking for her now. Really going for everywhere he can go in Madripoor. So we're gonna continue on with that day's character, who's called Jarella. Now, she's not very well known, but she has been around in a few issues, was introduced in Incredible Hulk Volume 240. She was an empress of a world called Kai, or Kai, or whatever. This place is kinda in a microverse, I guess you can say. The Hulk accidentally arrived there several times. His mentality changed. He became basically a smarter Hulk, and he fell in love with Jarella. They had a fleeting love on and off as he traveled back and forth between his world and that world. Eventually, though, she dies as she's crushed to death, saving a child from a collapsing wall, which is during a battle between the Hulk and Crypto-Man. So that's, of course, very sad. So we're gonna move on with an Avengers comic, Avengers issue 4 from 1964. This is the return of Captain America. As you might know, before this, Captain America had been frozen in ice, along with apparently his best friend, of course, Bucky Barnes. Maybe, anyway. He is found floating at the Arctic Circle, around there. This is very shortly after the fight in the previous issue between the Avengers and the Incredible Hulk and Submariner. Anyway, the Avengers find Captain America floating there. They pick him up and take him in. He is, of course, very frazzled, so he kind of lashes out, as the last thing he remembers is the death of his best friend. Anyhow, he is soon accepted by the Avengers as the real deal, and when the Avengers arrive back at New York, they are instantly turned to stone as they face the press. All of them except Captain America, who was not actually brought out of the ship until a little bit later. Captain America finds Rick Jones, who looks very much like Bucky at first. He kind of gets confused, but eventually they work together to find whoever had turned the Avengers into stone, which was an alien of the race Dabari. This alien had been tasked by the Submariner after this alien had crashed onto the Earth many years ago. He had been tasked by the Submariner to make the Avengers turn to stone, as the Avenger had Submariner knew where the vessel was. Anyway, Captain America makes the debris kind of change back the Avengers again, and just in time for Submariner to arrive while they're trying to get the ship back up to the surface. Submariner fights the Avengers. Eventually, though, Captain America helps to defeat Submariner and his cohorts, or his subjects or whatever, and then he is accepted into the fold as an Avenger. Moving on to another Avengers comics, but this is a little bit later. This is from 1994, Avengers 374. It continues the previous issue as well, the Gatherer's storyline at all, actually, where Cersei is believed to have murdered several people, turning them into stone. Again, actually. However, she is trapped by Proctor, and we actually learn a bit more about Proctor and his origins, as it turned out that on his Earth he had been in love with Cersei, and they become the soulmates kind of thing that Black Knight and Cersei had on this Earth. However, she had kind of thrown him aside, gotten bored with him, and he kind of lost his mind. So he went to all the other universes he could to find her and kill her, to make her suffer as much as he had suffered. Now we come to the Prime universe, as apparently this universe is, to find her yet again. Now, the other Avengers are met with Athena and Sprite, who are two Eternals, who knows about the soul bonding and knows about the situation with Cersei overall. They agree to help to disprove this situation, and to they actually bring back the people that Cersei had apparently turned to stone. She is, however, trapped by Proctor, and Proctor kind of goads her. She breaks out eventually, and while this is happening, of course, there's a lot of tension between Crystal and Black Knight, as they have feelings towards one another. And Quicksilver sees this, of course. His and Crystal's marriage has been very rocky, as you might know. However, continue here with the Avengers, most of the Avengers arriving at the headquarters of Proctor, of the Gatherers. They meet a Watcher, gives them a weird message, a very cryptic message, and it ends with Black Knight, who is looking into who Proctor actually is. He runs a program, and he sees that he gets a match of 96%-ish, and it turns out that it is himself. So he finds out that Proctor is in fact himself from another world, which ends that issue. Gonna move on to Captain America 427 from 1994. It's continuation of the previous issue as well. This is the third part of Fighting Chance. So, to explain a bit about Fighting Chance, it is about a new super patriot. Not US agent this time, but another one. It is fairly unknown who this character is, only that he impersonates Captain America to really bring down his reputation, which he succeeds with. Captain America is very frustrated about this. He not only that he has a new villain who's really trying to just ruin his life, but he also has this affliction that the super soldier serum is deteriorating, which could prove lethal to him if he uses his powers too much. Super Patriot also has a friend, Deadringer, who can apparently turn into anyone if he has their deceased DNA, which he does here as the Cheetah, a small-time character who had died several years ago. They kind of stage fights with a phony Captain America and this phony Cheetah or other supervillains, and just to
make sure that it looks like Captain America is very unprofessional, just bringing down his reputation. Meanwhile, Captain America tries to figure out a way to get ahead of this supervillain, as he is always a step behind. Eventually he calls in Quicksilver, who he believes will be able to help him. Quicksilver is of course very fast. He might be able to intercept the villain when they hear about whatever the villain is doing, or Captain America is doing. Anyhow, continuing on, Dead Ringer is using the DNA of Blackout, the original Blackout, Marcus Daniels, I believe he's called, to kidnap Bernadette Rosenthal, who is Cap's ex, and his current girlfriend Rachel Layton, who is of course Diamondback. He kidnaps these two, and he is actually tricked by Diamondback into believing, well, he doesn't know that she is Diamondback, so she kinda switches uniform and attack him, beats him fairly well. Quicksilver arrives, beat the shit out of Dead Ringer. However, Dead Ringer has some aces up his sleeve, and as he turns into the Blue Streak, another dead villain who then defeats Quicksilver. He continues, however, with Super Patriot showing up, beating Diamondback, and Bernadette recognizes his voice as her ex-husband. So it could very well be her ex-husband. Cap shows up, he fights the Super Patriot. During this, a fire breaks out, and the fire kinda traps Super Patriot under a thick beam. And Cap being Cap, he risks his life by using his strength to save the Super Patriot. This will continue on in the next issue. Continuing with our issues here, this is Marvel Comics Presents 153, yet again, from 1994, but this is now story about War Machine, continuing the dying game, as it's called. Anyway, War Machine is now at the gang called War Machines, trying to figure out who had killed their previous traitor member. They basically say that it's not us, it is the rival gang who is outside, so War Machine goes outside, fights the rival team, kinda easily defeats them. He does in fact see a tattoo on a neck on one of the gang members, a tattoo of Hydra. So he does now believe that Hydra is involved in this somehow. We're gonna move on to this day's character, who is Lockjaw, basically a big ass dog who can teleport. He is a little bit more than that though. He is in fact of the royal family of the Inhumans. He's in fact also a Inhuman who had been turned into a dog by the Terrigen Mist. He has teleportation abilities. He can teleport very vast distances across the universe, and also into other dimensions as well. So that is that. We're gonna continue with the next issue here, called Tales of Astonish, issue 50 from 1994. It's of course Giant Man and the Wasp. They fight the Human Top, a character who is also called David Cannon, or has been known as Whirlwind later on. Apparently this guy is maybe a mutant, probably a mutant. He can spin really fast without getting disoriented or whatever, and he uses this to commit crimes. Eventually he reaches Giant Man's radar, and he's forced to fight them, of course. He gets a new snazzy suit, which kind of looks ridiculous, especially when it spins on his head like that. Anyway, the heroes try their best to fight him, but they actually fail in this. They fail. So more on this next issue. Continuing with The Punisher, Volume 2, Issue 90 from 1994. It continues the what is it called? Fortress Miami. Yeah. So basically, Frank is trying to prevent Carranza, bad guy, basically, from getting out of prison. They had previously kidnapped or kind of taken hostage a girl called Felicia, who is somehow connected to Carranza, or at least Carranza's right-hand man. She does, however, beat Microchip, knocks him out, and then escapes. While this happens, Carranza kind of plans, kind of plays it cool with his lawyers and all that. So Frank arrives home, revives Microchip, realizes that she is left. She left to her boyfriend, who is really bad boyfriend, beating her and all that. Punisher arrives, shoots up the place, and Felicia gets a hold of the gun. Punisher kind of gets some of the information he needs. She shoots her boyfriend, finally ending that relationship, and Carranza gets out of prison. He breaks out through some of his other hand man. Punisher finds out, of course. He tries his best to stop this, however he fails. Carranza leaves in a plane. So it's gonna, of course, continue further on. Now we're gonna move on to Daredevil. This is interlude to Tree of Knowledge, which is a very odd kind of storyline. But I'm gonna try to explain this as best as I can. So first of all, Daredevil has faked his own death using the exact copy of himself, the body of Hellspawn. When he died, he turned into basically Matt Murdock, and as Matt Murdock had been suspected as Daredevil, he decided to use his body to basically fake his own death. So now he is Daredevil, a new Daredevil, but the same Daredevil, but yeah. And Matt Murdock is supposedly dead. So he kind of reflects on this, how he misses his friends and all. However, he gets to know of a situation that's happening in Empire State Building, where a new villain, a very technological villain called Wirehead, has used some of his knights, as he's calling them, just basically guys with guns, to wreak havoc, basically. So Daredevil arrives, he beats the shit out of some of them, goes into the building. He meets Silver Sable, who is very skeptical about this, but she and her wild pack has their own thing going on in the building as well. They're gonna go for the guys with the guns. So Daredevil says that he will go for the top guy. So yeah, the wild pack, they shoot up the place, they attack these people. We get to learn that Wirehead is in fact working for Hydra and Baron Strucker. So Daredevil arrives into the room where Wirehead is, and these two fight. Wirehead is a weird guy. He sees himself as he is in a game. He uses very odd, powerful weapons, actually, that he kind of creates out of this supposed game that he's playing. However, he takes a human hostage, and he basically makes Daredevil choose between fighting Wirehead or saving this person. So naturally, Daredevil saves the person. So we're gonna move on to this day's character. This is Molten Man, Mark Raxton. He's a Spider-Man villain who's kind of rehabilitated himself, became a good guy-ish. Not actually a hero, but a good guy. He was introduced in Amazing Spider-Man 28, so fairly early on. A lot of things have happened to him. He's changed a lot. This metallic hue that he has was actually an accident, but it kind of makes him be able to melt things. He's like a furnace in a way. Anyway, he has a criminal record, of course. He's been in and out of prison. He was born in New York. He is single, ladies. He is also the stepbrother of Liz Allen Osborne, who is married to Harry Osborne, of course, who is now deceased, which is where he got his job from. Molten got his job from. So yeah, I'm gonna move on now to Amazing Spider-Man, not 28, but to Amazing Spider-Man 19. This is from 1964. It continues the fact that Spider-Man got a bad reputation from the previous issue where he was viewed as a coward. He is now, however, fully Spider-Man again, as he tried to quit being Spider-Man in the early one. However, Human Torch is kidnapped by Sandman and the Enforcers. Spider-Man learns of this, so he decides to try to help his friend to save him. He finds the Enforcers, however, Human Torch isn't there, so he kind of leaves. We also are introduced to Ned Leeds, who will later, of course, be the Hobgoblin. Leeds was supposed to be a kind of a way for Betty Brant to make Peter jealous. It does not work, however. Spider-Man eventually learns of where Human Torch is being held. He arrives, he sets up his camera as he has to make some money, of course. He is ambushed by a surprise attack by the Sandman, and then the rest of the forces arrive and they have a big fight. Eventually Spider-Man manages to break out the Human Torch and defeat the villains. Yeah. We're moving on to 1994 again with Web of Spider-Man, continuing the Pursuit storyline. Pursuit is of course about Spider-Man being seriously upset, naturally, about the fact that Chameleon had completely tricked Peter Parker with some fake parents. These parents had been basically constructed to get the secret of who the hell is Spider-Man. So, Spider-Man is chasing Chameleon across the city. Chameleon kind of lets loose a lot of villains. Well, actually not villains per se, but felons. So Spider-Man has to fight them, but he's really up in his rage here, and he actually has to be reminded by Chameleon to fight the felons to save the innocents. Eventually, Chameleon manages to get away. He gets to the house where Kraven the Hunter had been in the last, before he died, and it kind of becomes this grieving process that he has to kind of get revenge for Kraven's death. He blames Spider-Man for Kraven killing himself. Also a little bit sidetracked here with Warrant, who is facing some consequences of the previous issue where he was, how he acted with the whole lizard event. Eventually, yeah, he kind of moves on, probably gonna do some private work as Warrant Inc., as he hears. Anyhow, the Chameleon kind of sets out some feelers, kind of shows Spider-Man which way to go. Spider-Man arrives to see his own grave yet again. So we're going to continue right now, actually, with Amazing Spider-Man issue 389, the conclusion of Pursuit. So Spider-Man is at this old place, this kind of cemetery place where Kraven had his last hunt, and he's now after Chameleon, who is seriously conflicted about who he actually is now. He really misses his best friend, the person that he actually grew up with, and he has set some kind of traps for Spider-Man, some tigers that Spider-Man has to fight, and some mechanical animals, which Spider-Man defeats easily. He then fights Chameleon. Chameleon doesn't actually stand a chance. He's very conflicted about who he is. He isn't as powerful as Kraven was. And Chameleon tries to escape. he again thinks back about the past, about how much he misses Craven, and then he realizes, of course, that to Craven, Chameleon was just a servant, just this boy he could beat a bit, beat around a little bit on, and he was just a punching bag, basically. Spider-Man catches up with Chameleon, beats the shit out of him, spares his life, as he notices that Chameleon he doesn't know who the hell he is anymore. The story ends, however, with Spider-Man coming in contact with Chameleon's computer. He sees a file that is directed only to him, and there we have Green Goblin just saying "gotcha" over and over again, and Spider-Man just breaks down. Very nice ending there, really. So we are going to continue with a fan favorite here, and this character is called the Punisher. Yeah, most of you probably know him. Frank Castle, or Castellion. He, of course, wages a war against crime after his family was killed on a picnic by mobsters. And he is an ex-marine. He's a great, interesting hero, anti-hero kind of guy. Uses a lot of weapons, he isn't afraid of killing, which of course makes him a bit of a villain for other heroes. He was introduced in Amazing Spider-Man 129 as a bit of a villain, actually. Very quickly he became famous, got his own show, and rest is history, basically. He was actually born in Queens, New York, and he's just altogether a really cool guy. So we're gonna move on now to Fantastic Four 328. Sorry, not 28, 388 from 1994. So it continues the fact that Mr. Fantastic was presumably killed by Dr. Doom several issues ago. The family is... they're trying to make it, but it's really difficult, of course. Sue is obsessed with the fact that Reed must be alive. There's gotta be a trick somewhere. He's alive, but he's been removed somewhere. Maybe, who knows? However, their son returns, Franklin Richards, and he had aged a lot previous to this, of course. I think. I don't really remember. Anyway, they try to track down Franklin as he leaves in the previous issue, and they actually go back in time. As you might notice, Ant-Man is here as well. Not Giant Man here, but Ant-Man. That is Scott Lang. And he helped to configure the machines to be able to get to the past, and they get to the 60s. So we have Reed Richards here in the 60s, and all of them are really confused here. I mean, there's gotta be a trick, something like that, right? It isn't. They are real. Franklin, he sees the future Fantastic Four here, and he decides he can't have them messing up here. So he kind of tricks them into fighting each other. Meanwhile, of course, the Avengers, Hank Pym, he recognizes a signal that Ant-Man sends out to ants, trying to help them in the fight. And he immediately alerts the Avengers, who arrive to fight the other heroes here as well. So there's a lot of back and forth. Eventually, though, the real villain arrives, and that is the Dark Raider. No idea who this guy is. The Watcher has been on his case a lot about stopping doing this stuff. The Raider doesn't really care. He's very nonchalant about it, and he eventually kills the past Invisible Woman and Mr. Fantastic. Of course, then just disappears, and everyone is really confused or sad, which makes sense. So we go into the future instead of the past with Guardians of the Galaxy. So, as you might see here, this is overkill. He was in fact Taserface, as you might have seen in the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 movie. The Hollywood character here is in fact Wonder Man in the future. Wonder Man, he adopted this name instead, Hollywood, and is in fact a Galactic Guardian, who is basically just another branch of the Guardians of the Galaxy. He finds this Overkill person to be able to get to where Doctor Doom is, as he has been very naughty in the future. Get a little bit more backstory about how this villain became Overkill. While this is all happening, of course, Starhawk, well, two Starhawks actually, Alita and Stakar, they are kind of trapped together, and they move from the past, different kind of past, through eternity, who is kind of flabbergasted. Where the hell did these characters come from? The God Hawk, or Hawk God, or whatever his name was, is annoyed that these characters are, as they are his proteges, in a way. They are basically embarrassing him in front of his bosses. The Beyonder and Protege are there as well, as they're being trapped by these celestial beings, really. We're also moving on to a fight that the rest of the Guardians have with Mephisto and Malevolence, his future daughter. Eventually, though, we go back to Overkill and Hollywood, the big fight. And Overkill decides to, I'm gonna put on the self-destruct and I'm gonna scare the shit out of this so-called hero. Doesn't exactly work, as Wonder Man, or Hollywood, is pretty much immortal. So he basically just hugs the villain tight, and they blow up. Only, naturally, Hollywood survives and continues on. Ending this issue. Now we're gonna go to another issue here, a issue called The Secret Defenders, issue 15 from 1994 as well. Now, The Secret Defenders is basically Doctor Strange finding a menace of some kind. He checks his tarot cards to find out who he's going to contact to help him with this, as there isn't actually a Defenders team at the moment. However, as he is in a bit of a predicament at this moment, Doctor Strange basically passed the task over to Dr. Druid. Druid isn't exactly happy about this. He doesn't really want anything to do with that, but he realizes that he has to do it. No one else will. So he and Shadow Woman go to where this menace is supposed to be. This menace called Malachi or Malachi or whatever. Apparently a very powerful woman, mystic. Yeah. Actually, apparently Luke Cage is there as well. Maybe incidentally, maybe not. And so is Deadpool, the merc with the mouth. So these characters are basically pulled into this. Dr. Druid, he recruits them fairly easily, and basically tells them, I need your help to fight this menace, whoever this is. And out comes Malachi, whatever. She's looking for a certain sword, which is in a museum. Dr. Druid, of course, can't let her have it, as it's very powerful. She'll probably end the world with it or something like that. So she uses her powers to create these monsters or whatever, mythical-ish monsters that these heroes fight. It is continued, of course, in the next issue, as a lot of stuff happens. So we're gonna go for the last entry here, and this is Daredevil. Now, you all might know that he is blind. He is a lawyer, and he is apparently supposedly dead at the moment. Anyhow, he was introduced in Daredevil issue 1, naturally, and he has some very interesting powers. He's a typical street level hero, of course. Yeah, so he's been in Hell's Kitchen. That's basically his place. His abilities, of course, is very very special, as he's all his senses, except of course his sight, are heightened, extremely heightened. So much so he can actually feel the difference in colors on fabrics and the likes. He can read a book or a comic or a magazine or something like that, just by touching the ink and actually feeling the impressions of it. He can hear long distance. He has a very acute concentration, actually, which makes him be able to focus on a single heartbeat in a group of heartbeats, so to speak. He has obviously great hearing, as I said, great sense of smell. He also has a radar sense that kind of makes him sense proximity of objects and people around him. Even flagpoles or something like that, for instance, in a distance of about 80 feet, which is very useful for him. However, this is of course some limitation as well, as extreme loud noises, extreme smells and stuff like that can get him very distressed, as it's just way too much. So yeah, of course he got his powers from exposure to radioactive materials when he was young. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So thank you all for listening and watching. I hope you have enjoyed. Of course, these characters, these stories and all this, they are Marvel's properties and the creative teams. And I'm basically just a messenger telling this. Hope you will subscribe to see more content, and I hope that you will watch next week when I'm gonna do week 10. So thank you all for listening, and bye.